He brought electricity to millions of Americans who had never had it. He cut prices until ordinary working families could afford to light their homes. He built an empire worth $3 billion across 32 states. And then he lost it all, in the most spectacular corporate collapse in American history, wiping out the savings of 600,000 ordinary people who had trusted him with their money. His name was Samuel Insull, and his story is the most dramatic rise and fall in American business. A man who genuinely changed the world and genuinely destroyed it at the same time. Samuel Insull was born on November 11, 1859, in London, England. His father was a nonconformist minister. His mother ran a temperance hotel. The family was respectable, but not wealthy. What Insull had was something more valuable than money: extraordinary intelligence, ferocious discipline, and an almost supernatural ability to understand systems, how things connected, how they could be made more efficient, how a business that was losing money could be turned into one that was making it. At 21, he became the personal secretary of Thomas Edison. This was not a clerical role. Insull effectively ran Edison's business operations, managing factories, handling finances, and making the company work in ways Edison, who was a genius inventor but a chaotic businessman, simply could not manage on his own. Within years, employment at Edison's operations had grown dramatically, and Insull was recognized as indispensable. In 1892, when a conflict within the company left him without the promotion he believed he deserved, he quit. Chicago's Edison Company needed a president. Insull recommended himself for the job. He got it. He was 32 years old. When Insull arrived in Chicago in 1892, the city had more than 1 million inhabitants and fewer than 5,000 users of electricity. Most businesses and homes were still lit by gas. Electricity was a luxury for the wealthy and for large commercial buildings. Insull believed this was absurd, and that it was also a business opportunity of staggering scale. His first task was to make electricity cheaper. On a Christmas visit to Brighton, England in 1894, he noticed something that stopped him in his tracks. Shops were closed for the holiday, but every light in every window was burning. In America, this would never happen. It was too expensive. He tracked down the head of the town's electric company and discovered the secret: a two-tiered pricing system. Customers were charged a higher rate during peak hours and a lower rate during off-peak hours, encouraging them to use more electricity when the system had spare capacity. It spread the fixed costs of the infrastructure across more usage, making each unit cheaper to produce and cheaper to sell. Insull brought this system back to Chicago. Within a year of introducing the new rates, many customers saw their bills fall by 32%. Lower bills meant more customers. More customers meant more revenue. More revenue meant he could build bigger generating stations, which lowered costs further, which allowed him to cut prices again. The virtuous cycle he built is how electricity works everywhere in the world today. By 1907, he had merged his rival companies into Commonwealth Edison and secured a 40-year exclusive franchise from the city of Chicago. He now had a monopoly on supplying electricity to America's second-largest city, and the demand was growing exponentially. In 1911, Insull did something that had never been done before. He linked together the scattered electric plants in the towns surrounding Chicago into a single interconnected superpower system. When one plant had excess capacity, it could send power to another area that needed it. When demand spiked somewhere, the whole network could respond. This was the world's first regional power grid, and it is the direct ancestor of every electrical grid in existence today. He kept expanding. He took over failing gas companies, streetcar lines, elevated rail franchises, and utilities in Ohio, Indiana, and beyond. By 1920, his Chicago operations alone employed 6,000 people and served 500,000 customers, with annual revenues of nearly $40 million. By the late 1920s, his empire spanned 32 states, served 4 million customers, and produced nearly 15% of all the electricity and gas consumed in the United States, more than any other company and more than most nations on Earth. He built the $20 million Chicago Civic Opera House. He donated freely to African American charities in Chicago. During World War I, Woodrow Wilson named him head of the Illinois Defense Council, and he personally oversaw the sale of more than $1 billion in war bonds. In the summer of 1929, securities in his companies were appreciating at the rate of $7,000 a minute. But there was a structure underneath all of this that was far more fragile than anyone understood. Insull had built his empire using holding companies, financial structures that allowed him to control vast assets with a tiny amount of actual equity. His empire was worth $500 million, but the equity underneath it was just $27 million. The whole thing worked perfectly as long as stock prices kept rising and credit kept flowing. It was a machine built to run in one direction only. In October 1929, the direction changed. Insull did everything he could to stop the collapse. He borrowed $5 million of his own money and turned it over to his companies. He sold his 4,000-acre country estate. He surrendered his life insurance policy. He gave everything he had. It was not enough. In June 1932, he resigned from all his positions. The holding companies collapsed like dominoes. 600,000 shareholders, ordinary Chicago workers who had bought Insull stock with their savings, sometimes because their employers had pressured them to, lost everything. Franklin Roosevelt, running for president, cited Insull by name as a symbol of the reckless financial abuses of the 1920s. Insull fled to Europe. He was caught in Turkey and extradited back to the United States in 1934 to face federal charges of embezzlement, fraud, and mail fraud. He was tried 3 times. He was acquitted all 3 times. The jury saw him as a failed businessman, not a criminal. But it didn't matter. His reputation was destroyed. He moved to Paris a free but broken man. On July 16, 1938, Samuel Insull collapsed on the platform of a Paris metro station. His wallet contained the equivalent of about 84 cents. What did Samuel Insull actually build? 4 things that never went away. First, the modern electric grid. His interconnected regional power system of 1911 is the direct ancestor of the grid that powers every home in America today. Commonwealth Edison, People's Gas, and Public Service of Northern Illinois all survived his collapse. They are still operating. Second, demand-based utility pricing. His 2-tiered system, charge less at off-peak hours to spread the cost of infrastructure across more usage, is standard practice in every electricity market in the world. He invented it in Chicago in 1897. Third, the regulatory framework. His collapse triggered the Public Utility Holding Company Act of 1935, the law that broke up overly complex utility holding companies and imposed transparency and accountability on the industry. The modern utility regulatory system exists, in large part, because of what he did and what happened when it fell apart. Fourth, the warning about leverage. A man of genuine genius, building real and valuable infrastructure, destroyed himself and 600,000 ordinary people because he piled too much financial complexity on top of something that worked perfectly well without it. 3 lessons from Samuel Insull's life. First, scale and leverage are not the same thing. Insull built real infrastructure that genuinely improved millions of lives. Then, he over-leveraged it until the structure could not survive a downturn. Size without resilience is not strength. It is fragility wearing the mask of strength. Second, lower the price, grow the market. Every time Insull cut electricity prices, more people used more electricity, and his revenues grew. The lesson, which seems obvious in retrospect, is that volume at a lower price can beat exclusivity at a high price. He proved it on a continental scale. Third, arrogance kills the ability to see risk. Insull's genius was real, his achievements were real, and his blindness was equally real. He bossed politicians, funded both parties, and believed he was genuinely untouchable. By the time he understood what was happening to him, it was too late to stop it. He lit up Chicago when it was dark. He built the system that still powers the nation. And he died on a subway platform in Paris with 84 cents in his pocket. Samuel Insull, the man who brought light to America, and the most instructive cautionary tale in American business history. Thank you for joining us for episode 26. Stay curious.